You can achieve a lot with very little. Like, we've sold a film to Netflix, we've had films play in cinemas all around the world. No one has ever asked or cared what camera it was shot on. You can make a film that looks beautiful on the big screen without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on camera gear. Like, it's just, you can do it with a lot less these days.
Every part of the production process, every part of the financing process, every part of the distribution process, we were told that, no, you can't do that yourself, there's experts that do it. And then we spend a lot of time with those experts. And then you go like, okay, yes, this guy with this giant mixing stage in LA will do a better job than me. But enough for me to sacrifice everything else in the film because there's no money left for everything else? No. And with all of that money you save, you will make so many better decisions on whatever you need to spend time on in the film.
Matt Salleh and Rose Tucker are documentary filmmakers from Australia who currently call New York City home. Now, this is a special creator session because they are paving the way for independent filmmakers who don't want to be tied down by anyone or anything other than their own intuition. Their previous film, Barbeque, premiered at South by Southwest, and its overwhelming success resulted in a deal with none other than Netflix. Kind of the dream for filmmakers, yeah? They continue to adapt their style, but they are known for taking these seemingly simple and everyday things like barbecue or dogs and using them to tell a more intricate story about culture and humanity. They break it all down for us in this creator session, finding the perfect story, filming, the equipment they use, editing, and how proper transcription is absolutely necessary to properly portray their film subjects. And we get to share some of their favorite moments from this heartfelt film. This is a creator session that reminds us to take big risks, to trust your instincts and believe in your work because you know the story you want to tell and how you want to tell it better than anyone.
Anche quando andavo a scuola, non iniziavo ad andare a scuola, quando tornavo a casa la prima cosa andare a vedere i cani.
Paylaşabiliyorum yani köpekle bazı şeyleri. İşte moralim bozulduğu zaman işte bugün moralim bozuk diyorum işte. Bir şeyler paylaşıp da işte duygulu anlarda yaşayabiliyorum köpeğimle.
No, I don't know. I think I'm blessed. I think things are working out in my favor. My concept and my perception is that my God and my Allah is looking at what good is being happened to His creation. It is His creation and I'm taking care of it. So I think He's giving me His blessings and I can feel His blessings on me.
Nampangin ni gua kepunya mebelerem. Kambera gonya. Tadi gue jenguk cunya tikeri mube, anak mare en ben mara.
What amazes me is when bad things have happened to them or when somebody's done something terrible to them, they always trust again, which amazes me, totally amazes me.
Well, we love telling stories about things that are seemingly everyday, but that people get really, really passionate about. So, you know, a common everyday occurrence like a barbecue, something we don't think that much about, but it's something that really gets people fired up, pardon the pun. And dogs is a similar thing. So dogs is something we're so used to thinking about in like in a Western context, and we wanted to explore that on a global scale and maybe show people lesser known relationships. So what's it like to have a dog in Pakistan? What's it like to have a dog in a place like Peru? To sort of show audiences in America or Australia what it's like in the rest of the world.
And yeah, just like Rosie said, you know, if there's something that you tell someone what you're making a film about, and oh, you've got to talk to this person, you've got to talk to that, have you thought about this, have you thought about that? If it incites passion, then it's going to make for a good documentary, especially when our documentaries have people telling stories. I mean, like, you know, just storytelling is so central to everything that we do, that like, people telling stories with passion is our jam. So we've learned very quickly that this subject gets people talking passionately. So good idea for a doc, I guess.
My name's Rose Tucker. I'm a producer, sound recordist and editor.
And my name's Matthew Salleh, and I am a director, cinematographer and editor as well, I guess.
And we run our own film production company called Urtext Films. We've been working together for about 15 years. Our early days was basically volunteering on each other's short films, that kind of thing. We used to work with a lot of people back in Australia, our home country. We've been in the States for the last sort of 4.5 years. But we started doing a lot of commercial work, things like that, and then we got into documentary.
Yeah, basically we've always run very independently our own film studio. For most of it, it's been just the two of us. That lent itself very well into documentary, and we just found this real passion for it where we just really enjoyed telling people's stories. I think we were much better at doing that than making up our own stories. Our very first short film, we were literally just traveling and we had, you know, the cameras in our backpack and we came across a story and it sort of took off from there, I guess.
Yeah, so this is our very first short documentary. It's called Pablo's Villa, and it's about the sole remaining resident of a ghost town in Argentina. So this town had been completely flooded about 25 years ago. The whole town went underwater, and one old guy sat by the edge of the lake waiting for the water to recede so he could move back in, which he did. And now he roams the ruins of his town, and that's where he intends to live out his days. So he was our very first documentary subject.
Yeah, and up until then we'd been doing a lot of commercial work. We really hadn't indulged for a few years in our own projects, I guess. And so that one was really about, you know, starting to tell the stories we wanted to tell again. And you know, that was what, maybe 7 or 8 years ago now?
That changed the trajectory of our whole career. So we made this little short documentary, didn't think much of it, submitted to a few festivals and started getting into them. And it got into Sydney Film Festival, got into a big festival called Slam Dance here in the US, and we decided to head over to the US to attend the festival and see our film play on the big screen. And while we were here on that trip, we made another short film. So it's kind of like every time we travel.
That one was on a road trip.
Yeah, we
just
would
went
take
across.
the camera. That one we filmed a short documentary about barbecue in Central Texas.
With that one, people saw this idea behind a short documentary about barbecue and they asked, you know, we want to support you, what do you want to do next? And we sort of almost panicked and just went, well, how about that around the world? Thinking no one would ever let us go around the world filming a thing about barbecue. But for the one time in our career that we actually had sort of people backing us was for our first feature, which was Barbecue, which was literally Rosie and I traveling for just over 200 days to pretty much every continent in the world, doing a film about, you know, how people cook over fire and how that brings communities together.
So we finished Barbecue, it was completely edited and done, and we moved to the US with the film under our shoulder, a very stereotypical thing, submitted it to a few festivals and were lucky enough to get into South by Southwest. So we had our big premiere at South by Southwest.
Good place to premiere a film about barbecue in Texas. Perfect. Although dangerous as well. Like if we hadn't gotten it right, I think they would have really held our feet to the fire. But like, yeah, the film, you know, that was a perfect example of how a film festival can really help independent filmmakers get the buzz on a film, get people talking about it. And, you know, this was back in 2017, give people like Netflix an opportunity to see how the film resonated with an audience, which is why the day after we premiered there, we did what every filmmaker dreams of, and we sold a film to Netflix. So
So that was American dream, like going well. We'd only been living here a few months and we were selling movies to Netflix and thought, you know, we've got this made in the shade. Let's just go and make another movie and do that again. And then things got harder.
yeah, the market shifted a little bit. Everyone had our brilliant idea all at once, and so the entire world was trying to make movies for Netflix and people like that. And after, you know, we spent a year trying to get this new film, you know, the funding and the right people involved, and there was a lot of interest, a lot of talk, but it was slow. And we like to sort of work, you know, it's just the two of us. We don't need a huge budget like other people, and we just wanted to go and make it. So after a year of mucking around, we basically took the little sack of cash we had from outstanding Netflix deal, and we just made the whole film ourselves. So, you know, we had that little bit of money to do it with, but basically we thought, you know, this is the culmination of 15 years of working in film, where we know how to do, you know, I direct and shoot, Rosie does the producing, does the sound, we edit it together, and we're like, well, let's take it another step further. Let's do the picture grade, let's do a 5.1 sound mix in our own bedroom. Let's, you know, let's put the whole film together completely by ourselves. We finished that film, and that got into South by Southwest, and so we were ready to sort of recreate history like we did last time. And then, of course, all the events of 2020 hit. South by Southwest was cancelled. We had to put the film on ice for over a year, basically, because it was just too hard for two independent filmmakers to find headway in this sort of mess of a place. And then we basically did the next stage, which was completely release the film ourselves, which sort of brings us up to now. So, you know, we've already done every single stage of the film ourselves with just two of us. We're like, well, why not
take on distribution?
So we effectively form our own boutique distribution company, get the film onto platforms all around the world. It gave us an opportunity to really, I mean, look, we're sitting at home anyway. So, you know, Rosie designed the poster art, we did trailers, we did multilingual versions so that we could take the film around the world. So it effectively meant that two people working from an apartment in Brooklyn could basically, you know, handle the distribution of a film worldwide. And yeah, so I felt like that was sort of the full circle of us. You know, we started this whole thing with just the two of us, and now we're ending it pretty much just, you know, doing the whole thing on our own. So we're very proud of this film. Like, whatever happens to it, I think it's going to be this example of what the two of us can do, and that's where we are now.
Chino nunca en la vida me ha dado un beso. Y es como lo que más quiero yo en la vida. Yo siempre le digo, chinito mío, dame un lengüeta así. No. Un perro como que entrega dentro de sus parámetros como de afecto. En ese sentido, él es diferente al entregar afecto. No es como otros perros. A veces se sienta y te mira. Quiltro significa perro sin hogar, que no tiene hogar y que está buscando siempre comida y búsqueda de refugio. Y ese perro no tiene dueño y tampoco tiene salud y solamente se preocupa de su sobrevivencia. Pero recibe ayuda de las personas que están alrededor. Un día de enero del 2017
una de las clientes que tenía 2 perros, que es de este edificio, me comentó que siempre había un perrito comunitario que se llama Chino, que acompañaba a sus paseos con sus perros. Y un día vino y me lo presentó acá afuera y me dijo, él es Chino. Entonces yo le fui lo saludé, porque yo siempre saludo a los perros callejeros, les hago cariño y todo, hola Chino, lo convidé agua y lo hice invitar a que entrara a la tienda. Y no se fue más. Un día llegó una persona acá y lo ve y le dice, Rusio, ¿qué haces acá? Yo le dije, no, él no se llama Rusio, se llama Chino. Dijo, no, él se llama Rusio y vive en el hospital y tiene una casa. Y para mí fue como, tiene doble vida, yo no sabía.
Yo llevo acá en el hospital 3 años. El Rusio está acá como 10 años. Y de verdad que él es súper andante, entonces de repente se desaparece por semana, por día y aparece de nuevo acá, pues. Yo no sé cómo hoy día lo pillaron de milagro, yo creo, porque prácticamente casi los fines de semana, yo trabajo los fines de semana, entonces no se ve acá. Y me sorprendió que lo hayan pillado, porque él es así, pues, está y de repente desaparece. Esa es la vida de él.
Okay, so we'll start by talking about Chino / Rusio / Colosso, our very large street dog in Santiago. The story we wanted to tell here was basically, we all know that there's street dogs, but we might not fully understand that in some places those dogs are actually really well cared for and looked after and loved, and are actually a really big part of the community. So we had read stories about these quiltros, as they're called, in Santiago, who are looked after by people in their neighbourhood, and we wanted to learn more about that. And so we hired a researcher down in Chile, and she does street tours for a living, so she's very familiar with the streets and the dogs that live there, and she instantly came back to us and said, Chino, there's this amazing dog, he lives in the neighbourhood of Providencia and he's loved by all.
Yeah, basically Rosie and I are completely independent, it's just the two of us. We're a couple in real life as well, so effectively the cost of making this film outside of equipment is like the two of us in a hotel room and like a lot of airfares. So basically we flew all the way down to Santiago in Chile because we heard about this cool street dog. And that is scary, because that is a hell of a lot of planning to hope that a dog turns up. Because of course nobody owns him and he is a free agent, if you will. So we were like, we might come all the way to Chile and then like the dog just won't be there.
We'll not be able to find
and we're
it.
like, well, there'll be other dogs, or we had, and you know, you always plan backup stories. Like, I don't like to call them backup stories, but you need to have a few options if you're filming on the road effectively. But then on day one, we turned up going like, this is like 15% of the budget of the film to get down here. And like, this dog better be there. And then like he was waiting for his day on set, he's just sitting there at the first place we turn up, like he'd been informed that, that we were going to turn up.
He was ready for his close-up.
We don't film with people that have had lots of media exposure or are TV personalities. This is just everyday people living lives in their own environment. And so we kind of have to do everything on people's or dogs' schedules. So Chino, he was just this free agent, and at night he just roamed the streets of Santiago. So that's what we had to do too. There's a scene where he runs into the park and sits with all the other dogs, and he just sat there for about 4 hours, and we just sat there with him. And then suddenly, like clockwork, at about 2 a.m, he just got up and went down to the convenience store, and then we're on the road. So we literally just sat there ready to roll. And then as soon as Chino did anything, we just, you know, went with it. So I think that's a perfect example of how, you know, we could have tried to fake the situation, which we never do, but like just trying to let it happen naturally, I think was was really great because you get these amazing moments. There's a shot in there where Chino's like watching the traffic lights, waiting for them to turn green, and then like runs across the road. Those sort of little moments that you capture are kind of the whole reason you do this. And it might mean that you have to just sort of sit there for like 5 hours, but then, you know, you get that little 10 seconds of a perfect little moment and it kind of makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, and for us it felt like a bit of a microcosm for what we were doing with the whole film. Like the whole film is like, you know, how do dogs bring people together? And here is a literal example of that happening in real time with people in a community. You know, we realized as we were filming with these different people that all know Chino, but they don't know each other. You know, there's a few that have started to connect the dots and they're all sort of bonding over this one dog, which is really beautiful, I think.
Yeah, and it was an interesting, you know, this film has a lot of light and shade. The title itself, We Don't Deserve Dogs, is kind of, you know, a popular meme, you know, quoted hundreds of times a day on Facebook. But if you go beneath it, it's not just us, it's not just what's so great about dogs, but like, do we deserve this love and loyalty that they give us? Humans are capable of very terrible things, and we don't stray away from that in the film. But we thought starting the film with that fun, we showed that lightness, we showed this community coming together, and then we went to Uganda, which was a switch in tone. You know, both of our feature films have been an anthology of smaller stories that together form a larger tapestry. So for us, it's those switching of tones are just as important as anything else. So
yeah, so the choosing of the order in which we place things, the transitions between the two are always really detailed and thought out. It's not just whacking a series of shorts together. It's about what would work, you know, going from this really warm sort of lovely story with Chino to, yeah, the stark contrast of some pretty brutal stories in Uganda.
I mean, effectively, this is what we've wanted to do with film, and this is, I guess, our thing, if you will, is this creating a tapestry of juxtaposing moments of diverse cultural stories, and this idea that, you know, we can celebrate these cultural differences while we try to seek out this thing that unifies us. You know, with the world the way it's been over the last year, it's been really important to try and, you know, highlight these differences and celebrate them, but at the same time try to find these unifying factors so that, you know, we can have, I guess, a roadmap to that greater understanding. So for us, that move from, you know, the final shot is on Chino and then the sound comes in and then we move to the next place. You know, very simple, elementary, but like all of that stuff is really important part of how we told this film.
An ko ma ke maka ke peje kan bana ke nero wana ngwena ye wachier chudan karma wa o kono o mera mo lugo kara ke maka ke tero ka gamu chem gango lutugu chiero ke chielo ke nero karma ke nero mer ma dirte binu penya we filda ulwen ka awa chulwen tie ni tie da awa tie chi karma eon yang ka dong me an pe lui yo karmo lui ki bien ki ma chok Uganda ka ke duare Sudan ma ke duare Sudan kono ki gorwa ma ke gorwa ke cha ngono tiene ki bede ka ke chao ke siar ke onyo ilum wa beru marama cha biara chen mera chen matiri ne dong ko ler bieno goyo nero anda dong
an kar ma ke maka nultelo tena ma kwan kwetgi mari o ke nego gyo ma ana ne ko man nego ke mer wan na ke wang ki tonga ta tanga ala cher ke goy ki dul gen ma ana ne ke ori ma ke ber ko wang ne ke kwan jim patano ma ke kwan la bon pani ne ba goy dan ma ko kwano ke or ba ben ban ko goy jo kana Ina gana ka bada timna ma buya tika boye. Guri ka wama duong, na ka dan ma bong, na ka dan ma pul.
Karma oi lum kono ke me am doko ke ponya wa ke lak me lwen. Ke kwa na beru. Karma laj pe ma ka bich lum kono. Piana ka pe chil mo doko bana o kono kama dong go na gwar ye. Ke chaka rara dong mo doko ni. Beru ka chwala bana ye. Ne ko dano ka wanga mo mier wa kan pa lui. Wak chunya be teknika an ba lui ke be nera ke jimeni wa be ka teme ke kwa na kon na ti ma ka par dek ma adu gang beru acha ko be nungu ko ma tek ke kwana Pen dano kin gang jirani ginela ke wang marat
Acha ko be kin dan don tamai no primeiro be kin dan pe no dan ma ti kan lengi wen. Nano ke praji wa tam ne ke kana cha wen ben buya.
Kacake ma grup ma lo der ma biana kacake ene lo der ne franci ti ye kacalo gen ko ter ne gen ge choko chuin wa ge lok me chi mo tok ge mene wale ma chalo guak pen guak pe chi mo tok wa che an ma chalo an abedi gi me ano ni aye ne ge mena le ma chalo achako nyene sadik
Anya gluonu mara ji wakanye la
Ci iya beru yombe ar mo kuma ya eni acha ko ki gwakani acha ko benani
chako nying guak kan ke chako gere gen maguma temi kuni ene I chaka ye guak kan ye la roma Tian lok mo weka chaka nying la roma ni no lok dong duong tutwa lo weka chaka ni la roma
ya gan rot acha ko piana awati umere be dano be mamaru ba piano ba wa ana tu kama lengu no papi du pero ba ma be ena ba acha ko nye kumana
La roma konyo ana yu ma jiji Ken tek la roma neno ke ken Ajiji mo de mano ka kira chu ria paro kuma poni kada neo la roma biro kangara tama wen to be kum la roma ke ken chu we ko kwanyo gin e no ke kwona Gena no biro wi neno mer makitong Tiene ki bere no to bina e wia Agini ane dong u ye dong Ken la rama dong bio buru kangara Wel gini anu Ne anu la rama chalu mekina Kilu mekina Walek mana bura leko cha wengna Ketika ria mutaka gelum Ketika cimo taka ni tindak jirai no da kene ni yin nya ne ko dana yin bere kirene na bere ka le kone kom bere le ma chala sa dego kwa nyam jimi wen ka che chunya chue alunga chak ka ngara pa to ko kere kera bere kere ene ta ka yue ko me
Roma Roma Mawatika Barbeque lock combat Jimmy Machon Wang Quanya Via. Tamnes a Digo Jingo Junior Jimmy Wang Motime Combat ticket and Waka Beach.
So with Uganda, it was one of the last things we filmed. We were really struggling to find a story in Africa because when you try and Google dogs in Africa, you just get horrible stories of dogs being mistreated or, stray dogs causing a problem.
And I should point out that these are always stories told by like white Westerners. Yeah. Imposing their eyes on the situation, which we have found is incredibly unreliable if you're doing like internet research and stuff like that. And so when we say that these stories didn't feel very true to the situation.
Yeah, I'm like, no, there has to be. I'm like, I know that people are going to love their dogs in Africa just as much as anywhere else. We were struggling to get a foothold on a good story. And then one day I just came across this article about the Comfort Dog Project and the work they're doing there, teaming up child soldiers with dogs that are in need of a home. And it was like, bang, perfect story. And it was one of those, like, everything just fell into place. I sent them an email. They responded within 20 minutes and they said, we're going to be there in 2 weeks. Can you get here? And I said, yes.
Yes. And this is about the freedom of, because it's just the two of us, we have this incredible versatility. When we made Barbeque, there were investors and there were other producers. There were all these people involved. So we had to map out this whole film. And they're like, well, what are you going to film? And we're like, well, we have no idea. Like, it's really important when you do documentary that you don't have a prescribed story you want to tell, because you will either try and force that story when it's not what the reality is, in which case you end up with a crappy movie, or you're not ready to move and shift with it, in which case you fall short. There's that famous story with Capturing the Freedmans where a guy starts telling a story about a couple of clowns and ends up telling a story about something much darker because he was ready to just go, I'm going to throw out that whole film, I'm just going to do this film because that's where it's taking us. The reason why we stay so independent is so that we can have that versatility. So when Rosie heard about this story and they said, come on over, we're like, yes, absolutely. Let's just drop everything we're doing and let's just go over there.
Yeah, and so the team over there was gearing up for World Rabies Day, which is the scene we introduced Uganda with. Everyone in town brought their dogs to get their dogs vaccinated for free. So, people have this perception that maybe people in Africa don't care about their dogs. They absolutely do. There they are, literally thousands of people turned up that morning with their puppies and dogs to have them vaccinated. They waited in line
sometimes like 15, 16 hours.
Yeah, all day. Yeah. This went all day long. It's not too different to some of the scenes you see here now, actually. And then we met with the former child soldiers who are, living with their dogs now. And it was really powerful stories, but also makes you really think about the relationship we have with dogs. We all know that dogs can be lovely and dogs are great pets, but in Africa or in Uganda, that's a newer concept. Lucy put it best when she said, I didn't know dogs could be trained to be your friend. She's used to dogs being the enemy, and as a child soldier, dogs would often bark or chase them or bite them or give them away, and dogs were definitely the enemy. So it was very interesting to see her learning that new side of, the human-dog relationship.
Probably the most important thing in our documentaries is letting people tell their own stories. We're not in our films, we sort of joke that if we're putting ourselves in our films, then we must be doing something wrong because everyone we interview is much more interesting than we are. We never have any narrators, we never have any voiceovers, it's just people telling their stories, importantly in their own language. They have complete agency over their own story. And I think it was really strong here in Uganda. We had to tread very lightly at first. This is about the worst thing human beings can do to each other, because not only are these children tortured and traumatized as children, but if you get past that nightmare, then when they come back into the community later, they're ostracized because in many ways they were seen as the bad guy. It's this compounding problem. It's very dark to confront. We were very lucky because the person that was our translator had started up group therapy sessions and was a major force in northern Uganda with sort of helping people deal with this troubled past. And so we were like, we don't want to create, open wounds. We don't want our film to create problems. But no, it was actually the complete opposite. These former child soldiers, they were finding power and agency in their own stories by retelling them. And I think so literally...
It's actually a part of their therapy.
Yes, and so...
to tell it. You can tell that these people have told this story before. Like it's part of that kind of recovery that they go through, and by taking ownership of what happened to them and telling people about it, then that really helps in their recovery.
Yeah, and I think a few people have commented that there's all these details in the way people tell their stories. That to me is the most fascinating thing. This film was about how dogs offer people comfort, and when they're telling the hardest parts of their stories, they're holding onto those dogs tightly. We never had a rule on whether people would have their dogs in the interview or not. We were like, let's just let sort of chaos reign, and if the dog comes and sits down, it does. So we never sort of like planted a dog there, but all of the people in Uganda just insisted on having their dog by their side. The dog listens. The dog is a part of that storytelling process. So the story that Filda, I think, tells is probably one of the hardest stories I've ever had to listen to be retold, and she just told it with strength and power because of the dog. I think if nothing else, the filming in Uganda just sort of like cemented a lot of our ideas. We can be isolated for years on end making a film, and you sort of go like, is it all worth it? What are we doing? Sort of thing. And then when you hear the resonance of a story, and then rediscover it again when you get it properly translated, and then rediscover it again as you edit it together and put it with pictures that have new meaning as you go through the editing process. There's a certain challenge in working with multiple languages and having people tell their own stories, and there's no easy cheat of just being able to cut to a voiceover to explain a situation. So sometimes people explain things and it's hard to bring in the cultural context and just get everything just right in an edit. But it's worth the perseverance, because when people tell it in their own voice, and it has so much power and so much gravitas, I think that sort of was a confirmation of like the kind of style we've chosen to adopt, if nothing else.
So having people talk in their native language is incredibly important to us. So We Don't Deserve Dogs has 10 different languages, I think, including some pretty rare ones, like Luo, the language spoken in northern Uganda, is only spoken in that like small region. This sort of leads to a lot of complexities, both when we're filming and editing. So when we're out there on location, we always have a translator with us, and Matt will ask questions, translator will translate, we'll get an answer back, and the translator will give us a brief summary of what was said. But you never get all the little details at that time. So the real gold is discovered in the edit when we get the entire raw interviews translated.
Rosie then delivers the entire maybe 2-hour interview to a translator who goes through very carefully and gets all that nuance out, the complexity in translation that you can't do on the spot.
So this is what an entire feature documentary's worth of interviews looks like.
Double-sided, 4 columns, is it? 3 columns?
3 columns, tiny font. But you do get these amazing discoveries. When it goes off to be fully translated, it'll come back with all these details you didn't know you had on the day. So, great examples of that is in Uganda, very, very emotional stories they're telling us. When we got these translations back, we were just, stunned at what these people were willing to share with us. So Lucy's telling us about her dog Sadiq, and when, she explains that she didn't realise that, I didn't know dogs could be trained to be your friend. Was such a beautiful line from her. So lines like that, we didn't know we had those on the day, and then when it came
you sort of get a rough translation of it at the time, and then you get
the rough translation would be like, I love my dog, but there's so much more to that.
And then I think the initial Luo translation we got back gave us a little more clarity, and then we inquire and we go like, is she definitely saying that they can be trained to be your friend, or is she saying they are your friend? There's a world of difference between what she's saying there, and we owe it to our subjects to get it right. Poor quality translation suggests a lack of agency in their voice, a lack of...
Or makes them sound dumb.
At the end of the day, bad translation does that. And
you see a lot of it where people write in really simple English, and it makes people sound not very intelligent when
when there is this beauty and depth, and so we actually worked with a lot of non-film translators, but students, lovers of language, linguistics.
Yeah, the guy that did our final check of the Luo translations in Uganda was a lawyer working in Kampala, whose mother happened to be from the small village that we had filmed in. So he was able to work with his mum and help her check the translation.
Yeah, so we put the whole film together, and then we get that checked again, and then possibly again after that, just to make sure every little bit of the nuance of language is brought down. And, you know, we just learn so much about what's important in language, or little cultural differences that make the story have understanding. It's kind of like one of the most fun parts of the film for us, and such a unique thing that we get to experience that's not on every film. Then we get to go through the process of creating translation. So I think our film has about 950 lines of translation. A lot of distributors are like, oh, our audience doesn't read subtitles. And we've made films about barbecue culture, we've made films about dogs, so very everyday subject. We've had distributors tell us, oh, we're not going to release this in Canada, they don't read subtitles in Canada. Like, they don't read subtitles in Canada, what are you talking about? We had a really big distributor in America that focuses on international content tell us, oh, our audiences don't read subtitles. They're wrong. People, I'm really glad for Parasite winning an Oscar, because it sort of
subtitles are cool.
Subtitles are cool.
Just for
just this week. For me, growing up as a person who loved foreign and like foreign cinema, it's where I learned how to make movies. So for me, subtitles have always been this thing where, when done well, can really connect you closely through this rather imperfect method. That it'll connect you really closely to people in a different culture. That's literally the reason why we make movies, so getting the subtitles is right. People think we're a bit insane because we just talk about subtitles all the time. Everyone overlooks it. No one does it properly. For us, it's sort of, when we put these subtitles in, it's about the most exciting part of it, I think.
And that's enough subtitle talk.
Yeah, that's enough subtitle talk.
I think we covered it.
Yeah. In terms of the gear stuff, we sort of really think of it as sort of like, tactical operations. You have to have, we use consumer DSLRs because I actually think that they can produce better images than the big cameras sometimes, but it's about that portability and the fact that we actually have two of everything when we're out there in the field and can still fit it into two backpacks. It's about as easy as you can get. So we carry two cameras, two sound things. If one of them goes down, we pick the next one up straight away, and we can just keep filming all the time. I have been a huge proponent for, about really the last 15 years that small equipment is like where the future is, and that people are getting way too obsessed with needing big gear. So for this film, we had the simple Ronin gimbal. That was, we got lucky, we got one of the first ones. So that's a one-hand steady cam. So that's, as much as you can get shots as smooth as Kubrick got in The Shining. You've got a full sensor camera with a full range of lenses, and the autofocus developments over the last few years mean that, it's effectively doing the work of a very high-end focus puller if you get it right. So now you've got all of that. So basically in this one bag, we have two cameras, two sound decks, a steady cam, and enough batteries to last about a week. And that's it. That's all you need to make a movie. And even this is, I feel privileged that I get some of the fancier lenses that I, get to indulge in that. But I really, really, if nothing else, I'd love filmmakers, because I know that a lot of people that watch this are like, videographers or people doing YouTube work and going, how do I go make the big film? And honestly, you just do it. You just do it, and then you solve problems later. You'll learn that there's a bunch of scary specifications that people try to teach you are impossible to meet, because they want to keep you out of the film industry. And then you just do it. And eventually, if you do good work and people just want it, I remember when we sold our film to Netflix, and we were really proud that we had it in 4K, because Netflix had just gone to 4K. And so we were like, oh, they're going to love this. And even then we were like, there's this mythical list of cameras that Netflix needs to get, doesn't matter if you made the film yourself. They like the film, they want to buy it. And I remember when we delivered it to Netflix, and the guy that was handling the delivery said, oh, can you do it in HD? Our computers can't handle the 4K. And I was like, okay, it really doesn't matter. If your work is good, it doesn't matter. So, that's, I guess that's one One little thing that I'm pretty proud of is that we've been able to do all of this with consumer DSLR, not to be cheap, but because it's small, it's compact, and it produces the images I want to produce. So yeah. It was really interesting shooting this film. So when we shot Barbeque, the act of cooking over fire is a pretty stationary one, which really complemented the images because people sit around a barbecue as the sun goes down and they have and the community gathers. So that stillness was really appropriate. We basically waited until technology caught up so that we could shoot this film because we knew that dogs were about movement. Dogs, explore their space in a certain way. So we had to wait for two things. We had to wait for a gimbal that could be packed down into a backpack and be operated single-handedly, and we had to wait for cameras that could autofocus so precisely that we could run after these dogs like crazy, and just the shots would all just work like magic. And we'd sort of wait and we'd go like, should we give it a bit longer? Yeah, well, there's a new model of this coming out, a new model of that. And eventually it all hit around 2018 when we started filming, and it gave us this exploration that we wanted, which was sort of filming from down at the dog's level. We really wanted, not necessarily through the dog's eyes, but in their world. And that means being able to move fast, that means being able to be low. And it meant that we could have this sort of indulgence where we could do these really, really long shots. We sort of joke that every long shot in the film is a reference to another movie. So the first one is in Italy. Beautiful long shot where we were basically having to track these truffle hunting dogs, and they would run up and down mountains and we'd be sort of legging it after them, trying to keep up. The shots were a mess, like we think they go left, they go right, up, down, like everything was in the wrong direction. We're at very high altitude. I was very unfit at the time. And then there's just this perfect shot where a dog just sets off on his way and I'm just behind there, and he doesn't look at me, he just goes on his way. And after about maybe 400 feet of running, he lands, finds the truffle, and the owner comes up. And you can't beat a shot like that where everything is told in this one. So that's our Children of Men shot. We joke, maybe because of its rough start and it's like down at the ground level.
And I like we intentionally left a few of those bumps in there.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
So that was our Quaron. That was our Children of Men indulgence. And then the next one was
in Istanbul, we filmed with Shemsei, our dog walker, and there was that one shot where everything was just perfect. It's nighttime, a couple of old men are having a conversation, and all of this happens without them looking at the camera, which was amazing.
Yeah, from my reference point, that was very Fellini. That was very like Knights of Cabiria, or even like that final sequence in 8.5 where the cameras are moving like wild.
And then the final sort of long shot's a little different to the other two. And it's the interview we do with Jorge in Santiago. And he's the old guy who just tells a story. He literally starts by telling us, I want to tell you a story about a dog. And there on the day, he literally did that. He just sat down, he talked for probably 20 minutes and told us a story about a dog. And we really like the idea of this, just holding on this interview, just letting him tell that story, very little editing around that scene. That one's our Gates of Heaven, Errol Morris.
That's nod to the master,
reference there. And it just felt like a last point in the film to have that little break where there's not much going on. We're just going to sit here and listen to this old guy tell a story.
All right, I only have one thing to say. I really want you to listen to what Matt and Rose say next, because it is creators like them who are leading the creator economy, challenging the norm and paving a path for a new way to do things. All right, I did lie. I do have one more thing, and it's the most important one. Go watch We Don't Deserve Dogs, and let's show our support for these independent filmmakers. All the details can be found below. I'm Haley, and I will see you next time.
I like to tell people, don't wait for permission to make, whether it be a film, art, whatever it is. We tried for a year to get funding for this. Unsuccessfully. Most people at that point would have said, oh, well, I guess we're not making the film then. But no, we were like, okay, well, let's find a way to make it happen. Let's take the little bit of Netflix money we get every quarter and put that into a new film instead of just frittering it away on New York rent.
Everyone thinks it's crazy, but then it's like there is this point where they tell you, if you put everything into your own art, you're a fool. The market is different to it was in the 70s or 80s. Like that could be the best decision.
And you can achieve a lot with very little. You can make a film that looks beautiful on the big screen without having to spend hundreds of $1,000s on camera gear.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you can do it with a lot less these days.
Every part of the production process, every part of the financing process, every part of the distribution process, we were told that, no, you can't do that yourself. There's experts that do it. And then we spend a lot of time with those experts getting built for a lot of money. And then you go like, okay, yes, this guy with this giant mixing stage in LA will do a better job than me. But enough for me to like have to sacrifice everything else in the film because there's no money left for everything else? No. Yes, having this boutique distributor might be helpful, but doing it ourselves where we have control over it and do the rest of it, there are advantages at every stage. And with all of that money you save, you will make so many better decisions on like, either locations you can go to or people or whatever you need to spend time on in the film. You buy yourself a huge amount of time because you've traded the 10-bit color space for an 8-bit color space, which no one cares about anyway.
We've sold a film to Netflix. We've had films play in cinemas all around the world. No one has ever asked or cared what camera it was shot on.
Yeah, it is so far from the and that's like Rosie said. It's because we didn't ask for permission on any of this. Maybe we've been at a point where we've gone through it. We were the first people in Australia where we're from that shot TV commercials on DSLRs. So we went into that area, that scary world first. And there were all these guys with big machines that would scare us off with really big words and like you couldn't do it. And you turn up on set with your tiny little camera and then like there'd be like, you'd be on other film sets and they have all these big things that, all over the top. And then but then the results would speak for themselves. And I think you have to have confidence in your own results. We meet a lot of people that edit their own work or do their own color work. They might, throw a Lumetri grade with a bit of a film convert on it in Premiere and then go like, but I want to save up $50,000 to get this guy to grade it properly. Now, if you've got $50,000 to burn, do it. But if you don't, and if that is like the whole budget of your film, have confidence in your own work. I think what people are doing on YouTube and what people are doing with short films is like, it's better than what a lot of people in the industry are doing. Everyone is in the business of saying that your work needs a professional touch because everyone needs to make money off it. The more you retain, then you retain the ownership of your ideas, you retain the content. You got to do a little tough sometimes, but the rewards are there now. And I think there's never been a more exciting time to work in film from a technical point of view than now. And then you can reach an audience. We've had this is the most rewarding part of it in a way for us, is that, we have controlled the release of this film. We've had people buy it in 49 countries now. So that, that's all of our, our control over that. So I think it's really important for people to not be swayed into thinking they can't do things. There is a pathway for everything, I think.